know you could do this from Discord to Facebook. I've done lives on like TikTok because I've got like 12,000 over there, and I don't know how to really do live successfully, but I'll try occasionally. And I didn't know you could do this from Discord to Facebook.
Yeah, I use a program called OBS. I don't know
Oh,
if you've
I
heard of
haven't
that.
heard of it, but I didn't know there were programs you could. That's interesting. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, OBS is what I've been using to stream every podcast episode thus far. I haven't really been doing video yet. Like, I don't know if you've seen any past episodes, but it's really just audio right now, and I have like the chat bubbles um, on screen. That's how I've been doing it right for now. My laptop costed me $300, and I've had it for about 2 or 3 years. So I'm not willing to test the limits of it. So right now it works the way it's supposed to work, and I'm happy with that.
No, I completely get it. I'm IT, and one of the things that I try to offer the community is free IT support. And like sometimes you just have to make it work with the parts and pieces you have around you.
Yeah, because and the reason exactly, and the reason why I'm doing it this way is because I want to do something with the little power that I have. I feel like doing a podcast where I bring on knowledgeable people and talk about like deep subjects and like, revolutionary subjects is the best I can do. Like education is like the best I can do right now.
Yeah, actually, that's kind of we started the org Red Star Mutual Aid. I don't know if you saw that, but one of the things that we're kind of doing, and we're coalition building with much bigger coalitions across the country, but one of the things that we're wanting to do is basically if somebody in the community has like knowledge on something simple, like say just how to fix or change oil, right? We're like, we want to give free classes and start giving power back to the people by just gently educating them for free on things that they need in order to survive. So like education's huge. I don't think people realize how revolutionary it is. Like
Yeah, I've noticed myself through experience. It is definitely what people need more of. We're not going to have class consciousness or, an overthrow of the bourgeoisie without the working class being well educated. And honestly, that's what they're lacking.
I think that is one of the things that the original Black Panther Party did really, really well. I think what we need to be studying both their successes and failures. And one of the things they did well was they had that newspaper and they just started educating the masses. And I'm like, I don't think we can do it through a newspaper anymore because who still reads newspapers? But
Yeah, yeah, not me.
I think there are ways to reach people, like, and I think we're starting to utilize technology how we should, but I think we still have a long way to go and a
Yeah,
lot of conversations to have on the way.
yeah, and there are also a lot of fake bots that we have to make sure that we avoid and not entertain.
I think yes and no. I've been using those bots to educate, especially in places like
Oh.
TikTok where you can just comment reply with a video. And I'll use the bots to educate on misinformation because those bots are coming from somewhere, right? And those bots are usually what do educate the masses. So I utilize the bots and then I block when I'm done. I'll make a like a response video of the comment and show this was the comment and then
Mhm.
I'll just block them when I'm done. But I'm like, we can still use the bots because these talking points are making their way to the working class. And then I use them to educate through it and then block the bot. I'm like, okay, did that next.
That's super interesting. That's I didn't know that. All right, I'm gonna go live now.
Okay.
Are we gonna wait? Yeah, we're gonna talk about it a little bit.
Talking to my friend from Turkey. He said that
Wow,
in Turkey they're having similar shit and they're gonna have probably be on the brink of a civil war soon.
wow. Yeah, I'm just gonna give it just like a minute for maybe some people to file in. Um,
Yeah, it's usually what you have to do on lives too on other platforms. I'm still learning Facebook's platform. I was not big until recently on Facebook, and then I was like, oh, Facebook works interestingly. I will say, I feel for Facebook, left book specifically, because having come off of TikTok, there's a lot of baby leftists there
mhm.
that need a lot of education and they're not ready for some of the conversations that we're having on left book. And like as much shit as we give left book, I'm like, guys, I
Yeah,
prefer it here. Having been on other platforms, left book's got it going for it, okay?
yeah,
Like
yeah. If you can surround yourself with the right people on Facebook, it's better news than anywhere else.
not just news, just better conversations. I think
Mhm.
more well-rounded comrades. I think a lot of people are coming to things that they need to. but they still have a lot to learn on some other platforms. Threads, especially. Threads is really liberal and kind of it's I won't even read my comments on Threads anymore. It gets so bad. I can't. Like I'm like I
Hmm.
can't with Threads.
I wonder if I should try Threads. I haven't tried Threads yet. I tried Blue Sky and I got banned off of it.
I keep forgetting I have a Blue Sky, to be honest with you. I keep forgetting to post to it. But with Threads, what I'll notice is they're very they like I was pretty quick to say I'm queer on Threads and that I'm a woman. Like obviously I am femme presenting, but I was like, the minute you say something slightly communist or pro-communist, they will get sexist and queer phobic so fast. People that
Yeah.
are like, I'm pro-queer, all queer people, and then you're like, hey, um, maybe Ukraine shouldn't win this one, and then they will get so sexist and so queer phobic so quickly, and I'm like, wow, that devolved fast.
Yeah, I'm anti-sexist and anti-queer until you disagree with me.
And then I'm like, well, okay, okay, Threads, I see you. I see you. That was a
Mhm.
lot. And so, like I said, I can't even look at my comments anymore because it just gets so bad. Like, there were some that even my partner was like, why? And I'm like, I don't even know. I can't even, I don't even interact with people anymore. I just kind of put a post there from Facebook. If it's short enough, it also just goes to Threads. I don't
Mhm.
even bother posting to Threads directly anymore. And I was like, they just do this. I just stopped reading.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Welcome to This is Dystopia Now, because it's always been. Today I'm joined by Allison Hold My Molotov, someone I'm a pretty big fan of on Facebook. Um, we are going to talk about Marxist feminism and the queer proletariat, but before we do that, I want to touch a little bit on what just happened in Venezuela. Um, we had apparently a kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro by special army forces under the Trump administration. Is there anything that you've been updated about that you could add to this?
I know that there are organizers working around the nation right now. In your area, there is likely either a protest happening today or around the country somewhere. I know in Columbus that there is going to be one today hosted by PSL and another one hosted tomorrow by PDC and RSU. So even if you're not, I know everyone has an issue with every group out there on some level, but if you don't have an issue with either group, there are protests being held in the Columbus area. And as I get information, I will be posting how we can help Venezuelans as I get more information on how we can help directly.
Cool, thank you. Um, yeah, I was kind of almost blown away. I know that they were, obviously they were bombing boats. We heard that they bombed inside the country, but after they kidnapped the leader, that kind of blew me away. They're moving. It seems like they're moving really fast on this. Um,
Um, I think they're going to continue to move really fast. I think Venezuela's just the beginning, honestly.
yeah, their next targets are going to be, I believe, Nicaragua and Cuba. And just so everyone knows, yeah, it's about the oil. It's also Venezuela also has one of the biggest gold reserves, if I'm not mistaken.
I
And
believe so, if I remember correctly, yeah.
yeah, and it's not just about that. Definitely, it's not about the drugs. That's a big WMD lie. But it's not just about the oil and the gold. We're actually in the midst of a new Cold War with China. And what the U.S. is doing is that they're reviving the Monroe Doctrine in their colonial efforts to control Latin America. A lot of people are calling this one the Donroe Doctrine. And the point of doing this is to cut off these countries' collaborations with China, try to control the Latin America countries in favor of U.S. Dominance. And yeah, we definitely have not seen the end of the U.S. aggression. There's going to be more happening in the future, and I'm glad that there's protests popping up all over about it. I'm happy about that because people should be rightfully outraged about this.
I think as activists, one thing that's important to remember and that I've seen happen time and time again. Now I know a lot on Left Book are quite a bit more experienced than me. I still haven't been a comrade for more than a decade yet. But one thing I have noticed is that what we will see in our country is that as we continue to pick fights with groups like Venezuela, even China, other groups like that, it will be taken out, especially by liberals and conservatives, on the citizens that even remind them of that country. Um, a lot of xenophobia here. So even as we continue aggressions with like China, it's going to be taken out on anybody who even seemingly reminds them of a Chinese person. You'll see it taken out on Japanese people, anyone, because a lot of Americans just can't tell the difference. We're also going to see a lot more hatred and vitriol come towards more Latin Americans as this continues. And so, really being vigilant and protecting your community members is going to be huge as activists. And it's just going to continue to increase, especially hate crimes across the country are going to continue. So, we have to be vigilant.
Agreed. What are the chances you think of there being like state sanctioned persecution against Chinese Americans going forward? Like, what do you think the chances of that are?
I think I think it will happen under a guise like it usually does. Again, this is personal opinion, so if anybody else wants to put in their opinions, but again, just based on what I've seen, it's going to happen under a guise. I got my start during BLM, right? And a lot of what we saw was in the rhetoric. It wasn't so much that there was a bill passed saying that this is okay to do. It was just rhetoric that was passed. You'll see the cops let it go and say it's okay that they're doing this. You know, they'll find excuses or whatever. And I think we're going to continue to see an increase in that. Some of them will be persecuted only to seem like the state cares. When they legitimately don't, they're the ones causing the root of the problem. But again, that's just based on some of the things I've seen. But if there is more information that goes back further, please let me know because this is all just based on things I've seen currently.
Interesting. Is there anything else on your mind before we dive into our main topic?
Um, Only that in that we actually can utilize this, I think, as a segue into the topic, just that this state sanctioned violence and a lot of what is happening is going to be taken out heavily on both the queer community and both women, I think a lot of. When you look to, I know one of the books, when you had asked if there's any reading material on this, one of the books I had mentioned I actually have here is She Who Struggles.
Mm,
It has a lot of discussion about different revolutionary women throughout history and kind of some of their struggles throughout that. And a lot of it does get taken out on more marginalized groups. And of those groups, even the women kind of get the brunt of a lot of it.
mm-hmm. For sure. So, to start out our topic on Marxist feminism, we should probably explain briefly Marxism itself as opposed to Marxist feminism. And if I'm not mistaken, it's a socioeconomic analysis or a political theory having to do with things like dialectical materialism, historical materialism, and most importantly and relevant to this conversation, class struggle. And
Yes.
and we suffer under a capitalist system where the capitalist class has domination over the working class, and capitalism, as we know, benefits from other systems of oppression. One of those systems of oppression happens to be patriarchy. They work together. How would you distinguish Marxist feminism from just typical Marxism?
I think in that the understanding of the different struggles and intersectionality, I actually did a post about this, I think, yesterday about this exact thing, is just that these struggles are intertwined with, but also outside of classism, in that sexism exists regardless of class, racism, queer phobia, anti Semitism, any of it exists outside of class, right? And I actually have gone down in class myself since becoming an adult, and I have seen the differences in sexism alone and in queer phobia when you're up higher in class versus when you go down in class, and how different that struggle is. I think class affords you some protections against it, but ultimately, because the system relies on things like sexism and racism and all of that, it needs to keep it alive on some level in every class in order to maintain its stranglehold on the working class. And so understanding Marxism means understanding the intersectional struggles of everybody who are under capitalism and how to combat those as well.
Right. I mean, especially given that the working class is comprised of the most marginalized people.
Right. And I think there was no better example. And I know there was no better example, I guess, in my lifetime than Kamala, I think was a great example because while we were not pro the Democrats, we never are. I was literally saying I'm not going to vote blue no matter who. I think the sexism and racism showed itself through despite her class, despite the power that she has. And we still saw that even though she was way higher up in class and power than most of us, these things still made it through. And I think that that's like a really good example of how it doesn't really matter at the end of the day. They're still not for us, even if we go up in class.
Right. And I think as opposed to just standard liberal feminism, like liberal feminism kind of plays the notion that sexism is just like a bad attitude that can be corrected on the individual basis. But I think the difference between that and Marxist feminism is that we're acknowledging that sexism and patriarchy are institutional, not just an individual bias.
Not only that, but it's intertwined with everything else, right? There was one thing that when I lived in North Carolina a few years ago, and before I moved back to Ohio, and while I was there, I was a board member on a nonprofit that was specific to single parents. And we had to collect a lot of statistical data to try to understand the problem and where the resources were needed the most. And one of the things that we noticed was that the problem is bad for women, single women throughout the country, right? But one of the things we specifically noticed was that the problems were worse for single women of color. And white women that looked like me would commonly use these statistics to make our plight seem worse than it was. We would just mix all the statistics together and say, hey, this problem is much it's so bad for women everywhere. Meanwhile, the women who needed the help the most when you look deeper into the statistics were women of color or even queer women who couldn't get assistance because they didn't look like me. And so what we're also noticing within that class struggle is women that do have even a little bit of power, women that look like me, that are super feminine looking, they tend to take that power and try to use it and gain more from other working class women. And so that I think is something too that we need to really focus heavily on.
Like the victimization of working class women as opposed to like capitalist class women. Is that what you're?
Yeah, not only that, I mean, I guess a better example would also be the statistics we see for like the wage gap, right? So like the wage gap for women that look like me, depending on which site source you use, is about 88 to 92 cents on the dollar, I think is the most recent one I saw.
Mm-hmm.
Versus I think the category I saw that had it the worst were actually Mexican women, which had 62 cents on the dollar.
Wow.
But when you saw it reported repeatedly, it was women that looked like me saying repeatedly, we make 82 cents on the dollar, which again was not statistically true. They were just combining all of the statistics to make it seem worse for themselves than it actually was. And they didn't even talk about it wasn't even a footnote about how women of color kind of had it worse. And they weren't
Yeah.
even acknowledging the intersectionalism, which actually makes it harder to get the resources where they're needing to go. But these people aren't trying to get rid of capitalism. They're not trying to acknowledge the deeper problem. They just want to deal with liberal feminism. So I think part
Mm-hmm.
of understanding Marxism feminism is understanding those statistics, is understanding the intersectionality, and is getting resources where they actually need to go.
Agreed. And not only is pay discrepancy a problem, but we have something called the pink tax. Where
Yep.
certain products that our society deems to be designated for women, they charge outrageous prices for them. Um, Women are charged more for certain services that men are charged less for. And if you combine that with the fact that they get paid less money on average, it seems like a way that capitalists can excuse the convenience of keeping, especially working class women, down. What would you have to say about the pink tax, if from a Marxist perspective?
Um, I would like to remind men or mass presenting people who don't have to deal with the pink tax that this does impact you too. There was actually one study that showed, or it wasn't a study, but there was an article of somebody who went around and was like looking at pants. And that sounds ridiculous, but let me get through it because I know pants. But they were looking at pants. Now, I don't know about some of you, but I, as a woman, like pockets on my pants, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I was going and buying men's pants because women's pants don't have pockets and they don't have a lot of like there's some queer friendly stores but there's not a lot, and so you have the men's department or you have the women's department. So I would just go to the men's department, try on their pants. If they look decent enough, I was like, you have pockets, I do not. And what they noticed was over time, the more women that were doing this, they noticed that men's pants were or their pockets were actually getting smaller because they would rather take things away from men than just give women the thing that we're clearly seeking out. And so, like, the more that you guys ignore these problems when we talk about them, the more it does over time impact you, even on something small like pockets. Your pockets are getting smaller in little tiny increments because you continue to ignore things like the pink tax. I also will go buy men's shaving cream because it's cheaper. Like it
Mm-hmm.
just is. You get more and it's cheaper overall. And it does the exact same thing. It just smells a little less. And I'm like, I can just throw on, if I want to smell like a fruit, then I can just throw on some body wash when I'm done. And again, we're noticing that that's increasing over time too. Now, that's hard to track as much because is that increasing because of inflation or is it increasing because women are buying it? But we are noticing these trends over time and it does impact you too.
Yeah, I would say like privileged groups such as men, or especially cis men, they're willing to cut their nose off to spite their face, and that's what this sort of what you said sort of sounds like. That they're
Yeah,
like,
100%. And so I'm like trying to gently let like because I early in my feminist days did not know what an MRA was yet. For those who don't know, it's called a men's rights activist.
mhm,
I worked with them not knowing what that was or why that was bad. That was my mistake. But I was trying to gently over time just be like, hey, you guys know like ignoring the things we're saying is actually negatively impacting you too.
mhm,
And that includes a lot of the common talking points we hear about family court. And I'm like, yeah, let's look at family court because like you ignoring women and queer people. I have a queer mother who lost custody because the state does not like queer people or them having custody of kids either. And so it's one of the topics that I like to discuss. The more you ignore these marginalized voices, the more it will come back to bite you. So that's, I think, part of why I'm so big about Marxist feminism and understanding Marxism and queerness and intersectionality in general.
yeah. I mean, when we live in a society where the gender norms expect women to stay home and not work for money, they still need menstrual products, for example. Who do we think buys those products if the women in the house don't make money? The man of the house. So you're still taking money out of the hands of working class for these products, even though you don't, even though, like if you have, let's say you have a nuclear family that has a man and a woman in the house, and society expects the man to work, he's the one still, it's still the money's still coming out of his account for the woman who the society does not expect to work productive labor, which is actually a good segue to productive and reproductive labor, because I think that's a big topic that a lot of people need to learn more about. But yeah, there's lots of ways the pink tax hurts working class people regardless of your gender, because the money's got to come from somewhere.
No, and it absolutely does. And as far as reproductive health or health in general, I mean, just looking at health, there's a huge disparity between marginalized communities, including women that look like me, and white cisgender men, right? And this isn't the fault necessarily of white cisgender men, other than that they continue to uphold that system that allows this to happen. But like, let's look at reproductive health. Let's look at health. Let's look at the fact that maternal mortality rates are the highest in this country than any other quote unquote developed nation.
Mm-hmm.
They are we continue to lose women and marginalized people over needless things because doctors will not listen. There's one doctor that I used to follow pretty extensively up until I watched one of his videos. I don't know if you've heard of somebody called Dr. Mike or not on YouTube. I
No, I
stopped
haven't.
following him. I will not, because so John Oliver, back in the day, back when I was still kind of going through a liberal phase and watching him, had done an actually pretty okay episode. I'd say okay, he's still a liberal. His
Mm-hmm.
domestic policy talk isn't horrible, but he was talking about specifically medical bias, and I didn't hate that episode. And then this doctor, I think he's based out of New York, if I remember, but it's been years since I've watched him, kind of like did a review of this episode and went into how it was basically women's fault. We didn't know the questions to ask a doctor or didn't know the symptoms to tell a doctor, or that we mask our symptoms even, and kind of just breezed over and ignored medical bias. So for those who don't know, just like there's a blue wall of silence for police, there's also a wall of silence for doctors, and it is literally killing people in this country because of racism, sexism,
Mm-hmm.
queerphobia, etc. And so like it's not just reproductive health, and this does impact you too. There's a whole movement called the intactivist movement, which I am a part of as well. And a lot of those people do not understand how just caring about queer people can actually help the intactivist movement, because even intersex babies, for example, don't have bodily autonomy to their bodies as babies. And these are conversations that I just don't think we're having in the scheme of the grand scheme of the working class in the larger picture.
Yeah, I mean, most of the time, intersex babies are just have their chosen gender chosen for them, and then they are have like tend to have surgeries performed on them as infants instead of letting that child just grow into whatever that they decide that they want to be. We're like literally performing corrective surgeries on on these infants, and I think that's a horrible thing. And when you circling back to queer people, I came out a long time ago as non-binary, uh, mask presenting, but then I still wasn't happy, but there was a part of me that wanted to be femme. And a few years back, when I first became homeless, I said, "Well, F it. I have no, I have nothing else. I might as well fully transition now." And I've been transitioning ever since. And I've kind of gotten the sense because I don't really like to exist within a gender binary. Like I consider myself a trans woman, but I don't really deepen my voice because I don't really feel like I need to. I feel like my voice is where it needs to be, but it does get me misgendered. So operating as a queer person within this society, it seems to me like patriarchy just wants to us all. Like queer people in general are just inconvenient, so inconvenient to a patriarchy because since we're not fitting into a binary category, we're not as easy to control and manipulate by the capitalist class. What would you have to say about the inconvenience of queer people within an oppressive system?
I think overall there's 2 points that I'd have to make. Number 1, you can't talk about feminism without literally talking about everyone and how it impacts them. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, and that's one of the things that's it's weird to me as a feminist that I get a lot is that, "Oh, you must be misandrist, you must hate men." And I'm like, that's so far from the truth that it's not even every feminist I know probably does more for men than any man I know. Like, Imma just be
Mm-hmm.
real with you. Like, it's just how it is. And then the second thing I would have to say too, is that not only do I think queerness is an inconvenience, I think it's a threat. I think the more that I think ultimately, I think that what people don't understand is that when you insult a woman on the basis of a woman, you're just being misogynistic or whatever. Like I got one today where somebody said, Ukrainians are a lot hotter than this bitch talking about me, right? When
I
you
saw that.
insult a woman on the basis of them being a woman, you are, it doesn't matter how masculine you are essentially insulting a piece of yourself. And queerness, I think, reminds them of that. I think it's more than just a hindrance to capitalism. I think it is literally a counter to capitalism on a certain level because it reminds everyone, hey, even if I am super masculine, there's at least a little bit of something feminine in me, right? And I think again, queerness is just a call to reminding them of that. You don't have to be queer to have feminine aspects to you. And queer people remind them that that's a possibility. And I think that that really, I think a lot of people struggle with that in the working class because they're told they can only be one or the other.
Hmm.
And we're like, nah, that ain't how this works. And so that's just kind of my personal perspective on it based on the things I've seen and understand so far.
Yeah, I don't believe anything in nature is binary except for binary itself. And trying to put us in a binary ultimately fails because it just doesn't exist. And even science can back this up, not just because of the existence of intersex people, but even people who are not intersex have naturally produced both hormones to some degree in their body, testosterone, estrogen. They every person, regardless of whether they're consider themselves a binary man or binary woman, which I don't even believe is a thing, but regardless, they have both hormones present in their body, just to different degrees. It's not like a lot of men out there seem to think like, oh, if you're a man, you have testosterone and you don't have estrogen. You do still have estrogen, just in a smaller amount, because even sex itself is not binary. People think sex itself is binary. Science on biology disprove that. Um,
I'm
and
It's
sorry.
funny because even a lot of birth controls will, not a lot, but, like, if it's a hormonal birth control, I've learned the fun way, can fail if you have testosterone levels, and that happens more frequently than people realize, which is why it goes back to that discussion of bodily autonomy and who do we give, choices to, but it's like these things are all connected the more you look at them. It's so, like, even something as simple as trying to see yourself trying to see your masculinity if you're more feminine or your femininity if you're more masculine presenting, and just understanding how even simple things like hormonal levels can impact everything around you. I don't think people realize how interconnected everything is, and I think if we can teach the working class one thing in this generation, it is exactly that. All of it's interconnected.
Yeah, and I think that the idea that they try to separate us as a civilization into gender binaries is not only unnatural, but I think it's part of a divide and conquer tactic by that benefits the ruling class. And if it didn't benefit the ruling class, they would use their power to end it. But instead, they use their power to separate us and divide us. I don't even agree with separate gender bathrooms. I think all public bathrooms should be co-ed. Because people go in there, and they're just using the bathroom. They're not, we all know, all of us with, you know with common sense and a sense of gender, we know that people are not going in the bathroom to do nefarious things. They're going in there to take a dump or something. Um, but
And I mean, the ones that are going in to do nefarious things are not usually queer people. They're
right, yeah,
usually the straight. Like,
yeah. Like if I wanted to be like a sexual predator, I would not have transitioned. I would have just became like a cop or a clergyman or something. Um,
and I think too, enough comedians have made the joke of American stalls. Like, we don't even, most countries that I've read about or heard about actually have stalls like floor to ceiling. And they don't have this like where you can see under the stall or you can see through the door, through the cracks. Like, that's not even a thing most other countries do. That's something that we specifically do here. And I've tried deep diving into why we do that. And so far, the only thing I've been able to really find was because it was cheaper, and
mhm,
we don't really care about people in this country, unfortunately. And so I'm like, we could easily, if you were that worried about it, it would be so much cheaper to make floor to ceiling dolls if you're
yeah.
that worried about it than it is to like sit here and continue lobbying against an entire group of people while also getting them hurt and or killed. For what? Like, what does this really gain us other than more culture wars so we're distracted from what's going on outside?
It's almost like
Which,
the profit motive reinforces patriarchy in itself.
yeah, 100%. And I think the pink tax is again coming back, showing how it's all interconnected. Is just another form of this. that profit incentive continues to allow things like racism and sexism and everything else to flourish because we have so much short-term profit motive here. And the only way to continue short-term profit motive, especially under a system where 90% of the wealth of this country is given to 10% of the population, the only way to continue is to continue keeping the working class fighting amongst itself.
Yeah, like what reason would we have, like if the workers actually owned the means of production, we had like democratic workforces instead of the hierarchical ones that we have under capitalism, what reason would we have to pay anybody less for their work? Capitalist just seems like they have an excuse to say like, oh, well, we can pay women and women, especially women of color, we can justify paying them less money because we don't respect them or their work if we pay them at all for their labor. We can justify that because it adds dollars to my profit margin.
Meanwhile, we can look to past regimes or current regimes as to how it could be different, which is why I think it's so important that we do study things like USSR, for example, who had a token system for their utilities. You didn't even really have to pay for those. The rent was 4 to 8%, I think, maybe up to 12, depending on where of their. But we're up to what, 30 to 50% higher in some places of our wages going to rent alone. And then meanwhile, now there were some issues within the USSR,
Mm-hmm.
and that is something that I do acknowledge even in videos. I'm like, hey, you have to remember during like Stalin's reign, he was leading people through many wars. Like he had the Korean War to lead them through. He had World War II to lead them through. He had the Cold War to lead them through. Like to sit there and say with historical context that there were going to be zero mistakes for one of the very first of its times revolutions that successfully tried to globalize, I think is a little bit asinine. But I will say that there are still some things we can learn from USSR or even current day socialist regimes.
Yeah, and we have to learn from them because I don't believe in perfection. I think perfection's a myth. And the idea of believing that something like the USSR was absolutely perfect is just plain unrealistic. And they did make mistakes. A lot of early revolutionary states made some mistakes, and we get better ourselves by, like you said, by learning from them. I
100%. And I think women were kind of upheld but also failed in some areas in the past, even under socialist regimes. But I think what's important to notice is they were failed a lot less than they are under current capitalist like systems. So we're queer people. Queer people were failed under many socialist regimes, especially
Mhm.
since there's a huge backlash in thinking that queerness is this Western ideology. And I don't blame people who think that, especially with the conversations we're having, how we're having them, how we will sit there and completely police a socialist regime based on just the queerness understanding. And it's like, well, let's give them a chance to like get out from under our thumb and then see what the conversations look like. And I think people lack a little bit of nuance in that specific understanding.
Yeah, in the last episode, I learned about China, and I asked my guest about gay and trans people in China, and she told me yes, there are queer people in China. There are gay and trans people in China. The difference is that sex in Chinese culture is more of a taboo in public thing. They do it behind closed doors. They don't, celebrate it out in the open like a lot of queer Americans like to do. But on the other hand, China's government is not trying to pass any laws erasing or restricting the existence of trans people as opposed to what we're seeing in the US, a capitalist country now.
I think one of the most misinterpreted things of nations, especially in countries like China, where we don't speak the language and translations are a lot harder. Um, Now I know a little bit of Mandarin. I'm not going to sit here and say I speak it fluently. I definitely don't know the characters, but I know enough when I'm hearing things that I can kind of pick out pieces and things like that. And one of the things that I have noticed from people who don't speak the language is that they don't understand how translations work. A lot of the translations are not as direct. And one of the things that we do know is that China has not had the big anti push for queerness that we have in the same sense. And so they don't have to have a lot of the pro laws that we need, right?
Hmm.
We make these laws that are pro LGBTQ plus or pro woman or pro whatever because we've had so many laws restricting them. So it's more of a reaction than anything. And when you are in a country that didn't do as much as we have done to kind of cancel these different groups out, you don't need as many laws saying pro this. And so Americans take that and interpret it as they must not be pro queer, they must not be pro woman because they don't have a lot of laws saying that they're pro these things. And I'm like, they don't need them. They don't need them. they
Yeah,
they
that's the
don't.
big difference. Exactly.
And so I
Exactly.
think too, their translations don't always come across, and so somebody will translate something on Google Translate, and it'll see they're anti-queer, and I'm like, yeah, that's Google doesn't know how to translate these words. I'm gonna just tell you that right now. They don't know how to translate it, and what you're seeing is a mistranslation, and they will take it and run with it, especially liberals.
Yeah, if you're relying on like Western sources to give you information on these things, you're not going to get an accurate output or an accurate reading for sure.
And I mean, I think that goes to something too. A lot of Western sources, I think, push a lot of the racism and sexism and everything else we see too. Even the sourcing we have here is heavily invested in keeping these groups down where we are. And I think when you go to read headlines, it just kind of proves it. You see CNN say one thing, and then Fox always has to have a counter, and then CNN counters, and then meanwhile, nothing is being solved in any of this.
Hmm.
They don't actually care to talk to anybody from these communities, or when they do, it's the one person who will tell them whatever it is they want to hear. And then the liberals take that and run with it. And again, do nothing to solve the issue, which is capitalism.
Yeah, capitalism is at the root and is connected to all these other systems of oppression. I think that, like I said before, I think the attempted erasure of queer people is part of patriarchy. Cis heteropatriarchy to me is no different than patriarchy itself because, erasing our existence because we're too complicated for a binary system to understand,
Yeah,
is
I mean,
relevant.
if you erase queer people, then what is the patriarchy? Or if you don't erase, if you leave queer people around to like blur the lines of gender, what is the patriarchy at a certain point, you know?
Yeah, I prefer my existence to be inconvenient for all systems of oppression.
Yeah,
um,
100%. And that's where I think the understanding and the difference between liberal feminism comes in, which is why you have people like J.K. Rowling, and then a Marxism understanding, which includes a heavy amount of intersectionality. And there's a reason we don't like J.K. Rowling.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Her version of feminism is a typical binary view of feminism, which erases queer people. That's why she herself demonstrates over and over again her inability to understand how trans people work.
But I think that is a nuanced conversation in and of itself. Like, even though one of the things that I have to constantly combat on the left is watching the conversations devolve about her, and it's mostly from men that I see it, but I will still see a lot of sexism go her way, and I'm like, whoa, we're trying to combat that. Like, if you are pro trans women, you should not be sexist to even J.K. Rowling because that will
Right.
impact trans women harder than it's ever going to impact this woman who makes so much money we'll never understand. And like, she can still deal with sexism, but again, she's a great example of she is shielded from quite a bit of it because of her wealth.
Hmm.
So being sexist to her, all that's going to do is impact trans women negatively. It's going to impact other women negatively. It's going to continue to impact those marginalized community, especially poor marginalized communities the most. And so I think staying on point, I think, is just so vital when we're having these conversations, even about J.K. Rowling. And I know it's easy to just want to be super sexist and call her all these names, but it's like it's not going to solve anything. In fact, it adds layers of complication to the conversation.
Yeah, I transphobia and queerphobia we've seen has hurt cis women in our society. We have cis women especially of color, who have repeatedly had to have their own sex tested because it wasn't believed that they were actually cis because they were on a little on the masculine side. And going back to your point, we if we're going to combat transphobia, if we're going to combat transmisia, queermisia, we should not be adding to the sexism in order to do that, because we're only hurting ourselves in the end. Not only are we giving them more ammunition to call us, names and stuff like that, but we are hurting ourselves because these things are connected. We have to be the example. We have to be the change we want to see in the world. And I condemn in the strongest possible terms people attacking Joanne Rowling from a sexist perspective, either mocking her looks or mocking anything about her femininity, because we should know from our own experiences how much that hurts us in the end.
Yeah, another one I've commonly seen, more recently is attacking world leaders and calling them queer as an insult or calling them a woman as an insult. Those are two that I'm seeing more of, especially with the rise of things like AI.
Mm-hmm.
I have not taken a major stance on AI other than to say that it's here, it's not going anywhere, so we might as well be having conversations about environmental impact that are realistic,
Mm-hmm.
and having realistic conversations about it. But one of the things I have noticed with the rise of AI is more AI pictures of people like Trump or J.K. Rowling, or pick somebody, even candidates like Ocasio-Cortez for whatever political position, um, getting called queer as if it was an insult. And then when I try to make a stance against that, even leftists have kind of like, well, it should be okay. No, again, that only negatively impacts what we're trying to do. Like, in my opinion, anyways, that's what I've seen a lot of lately.
It's like the same logic of like of somebody who's autistic calling people the R slur. It's still not okay.
Right.
It's still not
That's what
okay that you're exhibiting bigotry yourself in for the purpose of protecting somebody else from a different form of bigotry, not to engage in bigotry yourself.
not only that, but a lot of the times we have no evidence of queerness. Like one of the things I've seen, specifically for J.K. Rowling, is on Reddit or on Facebook or anywhere else, is calling her trans specifically because of her transphobia. And like, don't get me wrong, do I think sometimes a bigot is just so closeted to themselves that's why they're bigoted? Yes, obviously it happens. I'm not going to discount that. But like in the case of J.K. Rowling, I have not seen very any evidence really that she's trans. And personally, it just seems like another attack against women in the trans community to sit there and call her trans as an insult. Like, I don't know. Again, it's a feeling that I'm getting, but that's
Yeah,
just kind of what I've been seeing lately.
we've got to stop transvestigating people that we don't like, because that's a tool to me. That's a tool of the enemy. We've got to stop doing it. And we've also got to stop weaponizing homophobia against people that we think are bigots just because we think they're bigots. Like, for example, I don't care that Donald Trump blew Bill Clinton. I don't give a shit. I don't care. You do you, boo. Like, I don't care. That's not something to like make fun of them for. I think that, if anything, it distracts from the fact that Donald Trump sexually assaulted children, little girls, and did all sorts of horrible things with little girls. If you're busy talking about if you're busy talking about a gay experience between Donald Trump and Bill Clinton, you're immediately distracting from the real horrible sexist crimes that Donald Trump did. And it seems like we're playing into the hands of the right wing, because the right wing, as we know, cares a lot more about who's gay and who's not than who's a pedophile, and that really disturbs me.
And just as a victim of that stuff myself, it makes me uncomfortable to see a lot of it, because it screams to me that you care more about if somebody's queer or not, and if you can make fun of that or not, than you do about the actual victims, which is why I've done continuous posts on, hey, let's center the victims. Can you even name a victim? Are you
Mhm.
posting about this and you can't name a victim? Now, on my social media, I am careful. I only name the victims currently that we've either already lost or are already publicly talking about this currently, because there's been a new wave of harassment against them. So I'm not listing victims that we know about but are not publicly speaking right now, because I want to try to protect them. But I will list victims that we've lost,
Mhm.
because some of them have killed themselves, OD'd. just from the trauma of what they've went through. And so I'm like, if you can't name a victim, but I see you endlessly posting about Trump, I don't think you actually care about what Trump did. And those are
Yeah,
the same people that typically are posting these AI things that are very queer phobic. And again, all they're doing is upholding patriarchy. They're upholding capitalism. They're ignoring the roots of the problem. And that is not that Trump might be gay, which again, we have zero. If anything, I think we have more evidence that he's not gay than we do that he is.
yeah,
Not that it would matter either way. So I don't know.
yeah.
Again, this is just what I've been seeing lately, and it's kind of a topic that's been burning in my head.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing as like you're offending like on a different issue. If you're talking about like the Palestinian plight, people are like, "Well, you're being anti-Semitic because you're ignoring like the Jewish feelings about Israel." When really, no, we're focusing on the victims of the real victims of violence and other things like that. Like you're saying, people should understand and sympathize more with the victim, the female victims of Trump's pedo ring, than talking about Trump himself, because he's just a man doing this. He's no more important than that. But the victims and their testimonies have been ignored, as even by the FBI, for like 30 years. And the system
Yeah.
will protect these men. Releasing the Epstein files to me does not this is not going to solve any issue, because we've already seen a system protect the abusers and slander and or silence the victims, no matter if it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, because this whole issue is systemic. People need to realize it's not just one man, Trump, that's going around causing all these problems. It's a system that encourages many men to commit these atrocities. It's institutional.
100%. And that's one of the points that I've actually made. And if you go back to my Facebook or my TikTok, now my original TikTok was banned, but my current one is still up. And I do not take down posts once my opinion has changed for the most part, unless I think it's harming someone that I keep it up. The only reason for that is because I want you to go back and I want people to be able to see, hey, I used to think this way too, right? I probably spread some of the harmful rhetoric as well. And the reason I keep that up is to be like, see, opinions can change, we can grow, we can evolve, you can just be wrong, and that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. And I know specifically in regards to victims, even being a victim myself, I know I've spread some harmful stuff. I know I've also ignored victims, especially women. And I know that that's like a huge point of pride for me now is like, hey, I'm not going to ignore women anymore. And one of the things that I said in a post a couple months ago, I think, was specifically that we don't even need the Epstein files. We don't need them. We don't need them released because if you're listening to the victims, we already know. We
Yeah.
already know who's on it. You just got to listen to the victims. And so I'm like, I know who's on that list because I'm sitting here finding the victims' testimonies. I'm here sitting here trying to listen to the victims' testimonies. So I already know who's on the list. I don't really need Epstein's files. And the fact that we're so focused on that, it's
Mm-hmm.
obvious why we're focused on that. And again, it's to uphold capitalism, and we're still not going to do anything. And what I would tell to men who, because I know that I get this a lot, I get this all the time, well, what if it's a false accusation? Okay, well, let's talk about that. False accusations are less than 2% of all accusations.
Mm-hmm.
And when they end in actual conviction, it is most likely not going to be a dude with my skin color.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not going to happen. It is most likely going to be somebody marginalized who gets convicted falsely.
like
Um,
like How to Kill a Mockingbird, right?
right. Right, 100%. That does still happen, and that is something we need to be worried about. That being said, if we make a system that is more set up for victims, that includes victims of every gender, because I get a lot of, well, I'm a man and I've been a victim too. Okay, okay. Well, a system that is set up for victims is set up for you as well. And a system that is set up for victims, a system that does listen to victims will be better for men who are victims and for men who are worried about false accusations. A system set up that is restorative versus punitive. Capitalism prefers a punitive system. A
Mm-hmm.
system set up for restorative justice that listens to victims, that listens to women, that listens to all these marginalized communities will be a system with less false accusations. But right now, false accusations, unfortunately, are the only tool a lot of people think they have, which is why they're more likely to be used under a capitalist system. an opinion that I have based on years of research. I have books and recommendations for
Mhm.
that too.
Yeah, yeah. We've seen a lot of men claim like, oh, male victims don't get listened to, but we know that female victims don't get listened to either. So it's not like only men are not being listened to when they're sexually assaulted. We know that female victims also don't get listened to, and the fact that male victims also don't get listened to does not invalidate the real existence of a patriarchal system that is designed to benefit men. Men can still be hurt under a system that is designed to benefit men, and we see that happen when boys come out about being assaulted sexually and they don't get listened to either. The
And
point of feminism is to be able to help all victims of sexual assault. If anyone's going to listen to a male victim of sexual assault, I would think it would be a feminist.
And it usually is. We're usually the ones putting forward, even when men. Now, I have since stopped, mostly because I ran support groups for men and everything else, and they would just use it to be really sexist. And I was like, I can't. My mental health can't handle this
Mm-hmm.
anymore. I will listen. I still do crisis counseling for Left Book. I've seen a lot of Left Book people come to me for crisis counseling, and I will still listen. But the minute you start getting sexist, even a crisis counselor has limits, and will like I know I crisis counsel for Trevor Project, and they will straight up block you. And I feel like men think that they can put all of their emotions and all of their issues that they're going through on femme presenting people a lot of the time, and we'll just take it and take it and take it. And the minute we say no, the most common thing I hear is, "Well, see, this is why men never open up." No, you guys need to start learning to open up to each other in a healthy way first.
Yeah.
Healthy way being the key word there, not just opening up and being super sexist and letting the space run rampant, but opening up in a healthy way to each other, holding each other accountable in a healthy way. And I think that that's another aspect of patriarchy, is us turning accountability into a weapon rather than into the teaching moment that it's supposed to be. So I think people are becoming so scared under capitalist systems to even be wrong. And I'm like, no. And again, that's why I keep up posts, even from long before I was a communist. You'll see stuff where I was still a conservative if you go back far enough, where I said
Mm-hmm.
some stupid shit. But I keep it up because I'm like, see, I was wrong. I turned it around. And here, that's how accountability should work, right? And so I think capitalism just continues to ruin almost every aspect of every tool we have.
Yeah, capitalism is certainly standing in the way of our self improvement on a gender level. Like masculinity under capitalism is like we're talking about is turned into a weapon not just against women and femmes, but against other men themselves. Like men are treat other men like dog shit because of the way that they have interpreted masculinity from a patriarchal capitalist view set. And I like to say, for the record, I don't believe misogyny is real. I don't hate men as a trans femme, despite how I've been treated. I don't think a lot of cis women hate men, even though they've been treated badly. What we hate is sexism, not the men doing it. It's just that we know that more men are going to typically assert their sexism because it's beneficial to patriarchy, but I don't I don't hate men, and I think what men can do, the most pro feminist thing men can do is just stop being sexist, and they will immediately benefit in society from not being sexist anymore if they just try.
I think much like with communism, right? I know when I became a communist, and a lot of the experiences I've heard of others when they first become communists, is it's isolating at first. And I think on your journey to be anti-racist or anti-sexist, when you start to see the things that the people around you aren't seeing, it's going to feel isolating at
Hmm.
first. You need to get through that isolation and tough it out. I mean, you just do. You have to
Yeah.
tough it out, because whatever was working for you under the patriarchy obviously wasn't, because you sought out feminism, you sought out communism.
Hmm.
And so make it through that isolating time period, and you will build better support systems. You will build better friend groups. And I know it sucks. It does. But it's a process you have to go through, because until you have those more well-rounded people around you, you're not going to be able to get through it. And one of the things I tell men who come to me and are like, well, where do I start on my journey for feminism? The first thing I tell them is, don't try to appeal to women for a long time. I mean, honestly, don't. just don't. I don't really care what you have to say about feminism. There's nothing you can say that I haven't heard from femmes already. But what I will tell you is on your start to feminism, what you should be doing is checking what your space is like and what you
Mm-hmm.
want it to be like, and creating a more supportive system for men around you so they can see that men are allowed to be supportive and empathetic too. So they can see that these things aren't just this feminine thing that women do for them. We're not the emotional punching bags of men. And if you want to start with feminism as a man, the place I tell most men to start with building, being a more supportive person and building a more supportive network of men around you, and showing men that it's okay to have feelings. That is honestly the place we need you to start with. We don't need you to start attacking men in the name of feminism. I don't know
Right.
too many women that ask for that, nor do I want it, nor do I think it's helpful.
Yeah.
Supportively educate each other, supportively and empathetically teach each other that women are an okay thing, that queer people are an okay thing, that, start there. Stop using accountability as a weapon and start there. That's where I
Yeah.
usually tell people to start.
I I totally agree. People, places, and things. You are ultimate as a if you're a man, or if you're like a mass presenting person, you are responsible for your own behavior. And if you change your behavior in the ways that you described just now, yeah, you may lose some friends that weren't very good friends in the first place. Like, for example, when I started changing my attitudes towards things, yeah, actually lost a whole bunch of friends because those friends were sexist assholes who were constantly making fun of and bullying me, but I thought it was okay because that's just what guys do. And I lost those friends because those friends didn't want to be around me if I was like, not okay anymore with those actions. But I found new friends that were like-minded to my new sensibilities, that were better and more healthy. Like, men should not be afraid to lose a friend or two because they're trying to better themselves as a person, because trust me, you will find better friends.
Yeah, and it is lonely and it is isolating at first. But it's worth it in the long run. Even my choice of partners has gone completely different. The people that I'm willing to associate with, and you're still going to learn over time, even that will change, but you will still have a supportive group on the journey as you go. So I think it's vital to check who's in your circle and try to understand. And then, over time, keep looking at it. Just, is this still the person I want in my circle? Sometimes somebody who started out supportive might not be the best fit for where you're going, and that's okay. That should be
Hmm.
okay. Even in the context of romantic relationships, that should be okay. Sometimes it's just not a fit anymore, and you guys need to go different ways, and that's okay. But having a better support system will allow you to do those things in a much more meaningful way, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's really isolating. Like, men think that, being better themselves and being in touch with their feelings might get them isolated from their previous friends. And again, it might happen. But what's really isolating is capitalism and patriarchy. Patriarchy is responsible for the male loneliness epidemic because men have become lonely because they treat roughly half the population with complete and utter disdain. And so, like, women and femmes don't want anything to do with them. Then, on top of that, compounding it, capitalism isolates and alienates us from every aspect of our lives. So you have capitalism and patriarchy working together to isolate us from each other. And then men complain that there's a loneliness epidemic just for men. Well, one, that's not true. Everyone's getting more lonely because everyone's getting more alienated. It's just that some groups of people, like pro queer, pro women, these people tend to be less lonely because they're embracing other people unlike themselves. Like we said, if men can just learn a non-toxic form of masculinity, because I do believe masculinity is not toxic. There's a toxic masculinity. There's a non-toxic masculinity as well. If you can embrace your masculinity in a way that is not toxic and not hold women and femmes in disdain, you will make more friends on that side and you will be less lonely.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think that that's part of why the system hates queerness so much, because we had a rise, at least on TikTok. I know I saw it. We had a rise of specifically trans men and women coming up and talking about what they noticed before and after their transition, right? And so we noticed trans men specifically. I'm still friends quite a few who tried to have this conversation and were attacked really badly for it. But they tried to have the discussion of, hey, male loneliness is an issue, but not in the way you think it is. They're like before when I was femme presenting, this is what I would experience. This was the way I would go about things. But like now that I'm transitioning, like this is what I'm noticing. This is how men are treating me. Like, why are we doing this? And so like trans men started this almost slight movement of trying to talk about it and trying to talk to men on their level, and like they just got attacked for it. And then trans women tried to help come to their defense and
Mm-hmm.
also got attacked for it. They're like, this is what I noticed when I was mask presenting. And it is way different when you're femme presenting because we do things differently. Like, and so I did notice that there was a huge attacking point there, and that a lot of the things we're seeing now, like I have a trans kid who's only 7, can't use the bathroom they were using for a year now. And I'm like, why can't they? They didn't do anything. And they're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but it's the law in the state now. And I'm like, okay, but it has nothing to do with their education, so I don't for the life of me understand.
Mm-hmm.
And like it all seems coincidental after, again, queer people were trying to talk about this exact conversation.
Yeah, all we had to do, just like any other marginalized group, all we had to do was listen to them. All we had to do was listen. Like, for example, black people have been telling us for hundreds of years how bad white supremacy is, and we didn't listen. Queer people have been telling us for a long time how hurtful it is to be doing this towards people, and a lot of people don't listen. But at the end of the day, I'd like to wrap up by just making a few points. And one point that you've been pushing too, that I agree with, is that you don't have to be sexist against the sexists. All right, we don't have to use the weapons of the enemy. We don't fight fire with fire because that just actually makes more fire. We fight fire with water.
Yeah, 100%.
Also, I think menstrual products should be free.
Yes, please. Please,
Uh,
birth control, menstrual products.
yes, I think those should be free. I think capitalists should have no excuse to turn these things into commodities if people need them. And there are many men in the world who I know and love, and I do not take the criticism that I hate men because I advocate for men to be better men. I advocate for everyone to be better people. There are still men that I love dearly. I am I consider myself pansexual, so there's lots of men that I do like. Um, but some men just ruin that by being toxic assholes. And it's just easy to correct that behavior and become a better person than to take that criticism personally and act like, oh, well, it's women's fault that I'm doing this. Men have no one, and a toxic man has no one to blame but himself for his actions.
Yeah, 100% agree.
Is there anything else that any other comments you want to make before we wrap up?
Not that I can think of. Thank you so much for your time and energy today.
Oh, thank you too. I was really glad. I'm really glad you on. I love these kinds of conversations. And as for everyone else, thanks for listening to Dystopia Now. Um, Next week, I think I'm going to have a trans friend of mine on. We're just going to talk about the general trans experience. Until then, thank you all for listening. And of course, as always, never stop learning. I said end video.
We can't work. Come on, technology is like 3 steps ahead, 4 steps back sometimes.
Why won't you end? There we go. I had a lot of fun today. I think our conversation touched a lot of